The rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it felt like it was trying to erase the city from the face of the earth. It was a Tuesday evening in late November, the specific kind of Tuesday that feels less like a day of the week and more like a sentence being served in purgatory. The sky had surrendered to a bruised, heavy twilight hours ago, collapsing into a suffocating canopy of charcoal and slate clouds that seemed to scrape against the tops of the skyscrapers, trapping the exhaust and the anxiety of the city at street level. I sat behind the wheel of my aging silver sedan, a machine that smelled of stale coffee, wet wool, and old upholstery. My hands gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, but they had lost their feeling 20 miles back, numb from the vibration of the road and the cold that seeped through the glass. The windshield wipers were fighting a losing battle, slapping back and forth in a frantic, hypnotic rhythm, thwack hiss that did nothing to clear the blurring distortion of the world outside. The neon lights of Pioneer Square smeared across the glass like watercolor paint left out in a storm, bleeding aggressive streaks of red and blue into the gray darkness. I forced my eyes to the rearview mirror. It was a physical effort, a conscious command sent from a brain swimming in exhaustion. My eyelids felt gritty, lined with sandpaper, the result of 72 hours of hypervigilance and caffeine consumption that bordered on toxicity. The black SUV was still there. It sat exactly 3 car lengths back, a dark, hulking shark swimming in a river of gray minnows. It didn't have its headlights on, only the amber fog lights, glowing low to the ground, like the bioluminescent eyes of a deep-sea predator waiting for the crushing pressure to do its work. It had been there since I left the temporary safe house, a Motel 6 inches Tacoma that smelled of bleach and regret 3 hours ago. It had followed me onto the I-5 North, matched my speed through the slow, grinding crawl of downtown traffic, and now it was hunting me through the slick, cobblestone streets of the old district. They weren't trying to hide anymore. That was the terrifying part. When they want to track you, they stay 2 cars back and change lanes. When they want to herd you, they sit right on your bumper. They were herding me. They were steering me away from the highway, away from the traffic cameras, pushing me toward the dark corners of the city where the rain would wash away any evidence before the morning commute began. My name is Kayson Lewis. I am 29 years old. I have a degree in accounting from the University of Washington and a certification in fraud examination that sits in a frame I haven't looked at in 3 years. Until last week, my biggest source of anxiety was a rounding error in a spreadsheet or running out of my preferred dark roast coffee beans on a Sunday morning. I was a forensic accountant. I was the guy in the back office who looked at numbers that boring people tried to hide. I was safe. I was invisible. I was the definition of low risk. Then I found the anomaly in the ledger of Vanguard Logistics. It was a Fortune 500 shipping giant, a company that moved everything from microchips to medical supplies across the Pacific. I was brought in as a third-party auditor, a routine check to satisfy some nervous shareholders before a merger. It started as a discrepancy of $50,000 in the fuel surcharge accounts, a rounding error, a decimal point in the wrong place. But numbers have a voice if you know how to listen to them, and these numbers were screaming. When I pulled the thread, the fabric of the company didn't just snag. It unraveled. 50,000 became 500,000, then 5 million. Then $40 million of union pension fund money siphoned off into shell companies in the Caymans, listed under consulting fees for entities that didn't exist. I had found the smoking gun. I had found the body. Now, I had a jagged, encrypted flash drive burning a hole in the inside pocket of my jacket, pressed right against my ribs like a second, erratic heartbeat. And I had a target painted on my back that was glowing brighter than the brake lights ahead of me. But the most immediate problem wasn't the corporate mercenary in the rearview mirror. It wasn't the $40 million. It wasn't even the fact that my bank accounts had been frozen this morning due to suspicious activity, a little gift from Vanguard's influence. The problem was my skeletal structure. It was failing. The stress of the last 72 hours had collected its debt. The nights spent sleeping curled up in the back seat of my car to avoid credit card trails. The constant adrenaline spikes that flooded my system with cortisol. The physical weight of the terror it had all manifested in my lumbar spine. About an hour ago, somewhere near the stadium, my body had simply quit. A massive, acute muscle spasm had seized the right side of my lower back. It wasn't a dull ache. It wasn't a stiffness. It felt as though someone had driven a surgical steel pin into the L4 vertebrae just above my hip bone and was slowly, methodically twisting it against the nerve root. The pain was blinding. It was a white-hot noise that drowned out the radio, the rain, and my own thoughts. My right leg was numb, a dead weight resting heavily on the gas pedal, responding sluggishly to my brain's commands. My neck was locked rigid, the trapezius muscles hardened into steel bands that prevented me from turning my head more than a few degrees to the left. To check the side mirror, I had to rotate my entire torso, which sent a fresh shockwave of agony through my hips that made my vision white out for a terrifying fraction of a second. I needed to get off the road. I needed to hide. But more than that, I needed a doctor. Not a pill pusher, but someone who understood the mechanics of a broken machine. I couldn't outrun a professional team of fixers if I couldn't even walk. I was a sitting duck in a metal box. I couldn't go to the ER. Vanguard had people watching the hospital admission logs. I couldn't go home. I knew they were watching my apartment building in Capitol Hill. I couldn't go to my friends. I wouldn't put them in the crosshairs. I was alone. Through the relentless, drowning curtain of rain, a glow caught my eye. It wasn't the harsh flicker of a neon beer sign or the cold blue of a street lamp. It was warm, tungsten, amber. I squinted through the windshield. It was a wooden sign, heavy and carved, illuminated by gooseneck lamps that cut through the gloom. It hung above the entrance of a converted brick warehouse, a relic of Seattle's industrial past that had survived the fires and the tech booms. The Foundry. Dr. Harlee Price, M.D. Orthopedic and Trauma Rehabilitation. I stared at it. Orthopedic and trauma. It didn't look like a sterile medical office with fluorescent lights that hummed like angry insects and linoleum floors that smelled of bleach. It looked like a fortress, solid red brick that had withstood a century of rain. Heavy timber beams visible through the large front window, suggesting a structure that wouldn't buckle under pressure. There were iron bars on the lower glass panes. They looked decorative, scrolled in Art Deco patterns, but I knew enough about architecture to know they were functional. They were security. I made a split-second decision. My brain didn't consult my body. I just reacted. I yanked the steering wheel to the right. My lower back screamed. It was a physical sound, a grind of bone on angry muscle, but I swallowed the cry. I cut across a lane of slow-moving traffic, ignoring the angry honk of a taxi, and splashed through a deep gutter puddle that sent a wave of dirty water arching over the sidewalk. I slammed the car into a tight parallel spot just down from the clinic's entrance, putting the car in park with a shaking hand. I watched the mirror. The black SUV didn't follow me into the spot. It slowed down. It cruised past me, the tinted windows impenetrable, reflecting nothing but the wet street. It pulled into a loading zone half a block up, near a closed coffee shop. The brake lights flared angry red, holding for 5 seconds, then went dark. The engine kept running. I could see the exhaust puffing white into the cold air. Waiting. They were waiting for me to panic. They were waiting for me to run into a dead end. They were waiting for the street to clear out so they could extract the drive, and me, without witnesses. I looked at the dashboard clock. 6:03 p.m. Most specialized clinics closed at 5. If the door was locked, I was dead. If the lights were just security timers, I was dead. If I couldn't get out of this car, I was dead. I gritted my teeth so hard I felt a molar creak. I grabbed my leather laptop bag from the passenger seat. It felt heavier than it ever had before my life. My evidence, my burden. I shoved the strap over my left shoulder, avoiding the right side where the fire was burning. I opened the car door. The cold, wet air hit me first, a slap to the face that shocked my lungs. Then the pain. As I swung my legs out, the change in angle caused the spasm to tighten, seizing the quadratus lumborum muscle so hard it felt like the bone might actually snap under the tension. I gasped, a ragged, wet sound, swallowing a mouthful of rain. My legs nearly buckled under my own weight. I grabbed the door frame with my left hand, my knuckles turning white, nails digging into the metal, and hauled myself upright. Standing up was a mistake. Gravity was an enemy. The vertical compression on my spine sent a fresh wave of nausea rolling through my stomach. I leaned against the roof of the car, breathing hard, waiting for the black spots in my vision to clear. I looked down the street toward the SUV. The exhaust was still puffing. A shadow moved in the driver's seat. Move, Kayson. Move or die. I pushed off the car. I staggered across the sidewalk, hunched over like an old man, protecting the bag against my chest to keep the drive dry, though it was rated waterproof. The rain soaked through my jacket in seconds, plastering my hair to my skull, running down my neck into my collar. I reached the heavy glass door of the clinic. There was a light inside, a warm, golden light. I didn't check for a handle. I didn't check for a buzzer. I just pushed my shoulder against the wood frame and prayed. The door gave way. A small bell chimed overhead, a delicate, incongruous sound in the midst of my violent reality. I stumbled inside, the door swinging shut behind me on a heavy hydraulic hinge, cutting off the sound of the rain as if someone had thrown a switch. Part I. The general. The silence inside was a physical shock. It hit me harder than the noise had. The world outside was a cacophony of rain, tires, sirens, and fear. Inside, it was a vacuum of peace. The clinic smelled of cedar, surgical scrub, and clean ozone, a scent that immediately opened up the sinuses. The ceilings were high, exposing the industrial ductwork and heavy wooden rafters of the old warehouse. But the lighting was soft amber sconces on the brick walls, warm lamps on the low tables, not a single harsh fluorescent tube in sight. The floor was polished concrete. Heated from beneath, I could feel the warmth seeping through the soles of my wet shoes. To my left, a waiting area with leather armchairs that looked like they swallowed you whole. To my right, a reception desk that looked less like a barrier and more like a command center, a massive slab of live-edge walnut with a smooth, satin finish. "We're closing," a voice said. I stopped, swaying slightly, blinking water out of my eyes. I gripped the strap of my bag, trying to find the source of the voice. Standing behind the reception desk was a woman. She wasn't a receptionist. She wasn't a nurse. She was clearly the doctor. She was tall, 5'9" easily, perhaps taller in her shoes. She had broad, capable shoulders that filled out her white medical coat, not with shoulder pads, but with deltoid muscle. Underneath the open coat, she wore navy blue surgical scrubs that fit her athletic frame perfectly. Utilitarian, but sharp. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, practical ponytail, revealing a face that was striking, angular, and composed. She looked to be about 40. There were fine lines around her eyes, marks of experience, and perhaps a little cynicism, but her gaze was sharp as a scalpel. Her eyes were a pale, piercing gray, like the winter sea. It was the gaze of someone who saw trauma every day, processed it, and panicked at absolutely nothing. She was holding a digital tablet, her hand frozen mid-motion as she looked at me. "Please," I rasped. My voice sounded wrecked, foreign to my own ears. I took a step forward and nearly collapsed, catching myself on the edge of the walnut counter. I leaned my hip against it, taking the weight off my screaming spine. The sign. Outside. It said, "Walk-ins for acute cases. Until 6, she said, her voice cool and unbothered. She didn't look at the clock. She didn't need to. She glanced at the analog clock on the brick wall behind her anyway, emphasizing the point. "It's cozy. Veezy." She tapped the screen of the tablet and set it down. Click. Then she looked at me. She didn't look at my soaked clothes, dripping puddles onto her polished floor. She didn't look at the desperation in my eyes, the hunted look of a man running for his life. She didn't look at the expensive leather laptop bag I was clutching like a life preserver in a storm. She looked at my skeletal structure. I felt her gaze travel over me like an MRI scanner. Her eyes tracked the unnatural elevation of my right shoulder, hiking up toward my ear to guard the injury. She noted the lateral shift of my pelvis to the left, the antalgic lean away from the pain source. She watched the way my right foot dragged slightly, the toe catching on the floor, a sign of foot drop, a neurological deficit. She looked at the white-knuckle grip I had on the counter, the tremors running through my forearm. She was reading my body like a surgeon reads an X-ray. She was seeing the lies my muscles were telling to protect the broken truth beneath. "You have an acute radiculopathy," she stated. It wasn't a question. It was a diagnosis. Right-sided. L4, L5. Nerve root. Compression. You're losing motor function in the dorsiflexors of your right foot. I can't breathe right," I admitted, my voice thin and reedy. "It feels locked, like a vice." She walked around the counter. She moved with a fluid, efficient grace that belied her size. She wore high-end, practical running shoes that were silent on the floor. She stopped 2 feet from me, entering my personal space with the authority of a chief of surgery entering an OR. She smelled of antiseptic soap and something metallic, like rain on hot pavement. "Look at me," she commanded. Her voice was low, resonant, and calm. It was a voice that didn't leave room for argument. I lifted my head, straining against the stiffness in my neck to meet her gaze. Her eyes were level with mine. "Turn your head to the left." I tried. I really tried. I sent the signal from my brain to my neck muscles. A bolt of electricity shot down my neck, bypassed my shoulder blade, and exploded in my lower back. I hissed through my teeth, a sharp intake of breath that sounded like a tire puncturing. I squeezed my eyes shut as the world spun into a kaleidoscope of black and white spots. My knees buckled. A hand caught my elbow. It was strong, steady. It held me up effortlessly. "Okay, stop," she said. Her voice was right by my ear now. She guided me back to a standing position, waiting until I had my balance before she let go. "I'm Dr. Price," she said. "Harlee, orthopedic surgeon." "Kayson?" I managed to say, opening my eyes. "Kayson Lewis?" "Okay, Kayson. We need to decompress that nerve before you suffer permanent damage. Come with me." Exam room 2. She didn't ask for insurance. She didn't ask for a credit card. She didn't ask for an ID. She didn't ask why a man in a wet suit was shaking in her lobby at 6:05 p.m. She turned and walked down the hallway, lined with backlit displays of skeletal anatomy. I followed her. I dragged my numb leg, focusing on the back of her white coat. Grateful, pathetic, and grateful for someone who just told me what to do. For someone who saw the broken machine and didn't ask why it broke, but just wanted to fix it. Part 3. The diagnosis. Exam room 2 was spacious and warm. A large motorized medical examination table dominated the center of the room. It wasn't a simple massage table. It was a heavy-duty piece of medical equipment with traction capabilities. Stainless steel cabinets lined the walls, filled with braces, tape, and tools that looked more like a mechanic's shop than a spa. "Jacket off," she said, walking to a stainless steel sink in the corner. She turned on the water with a foot pedal. "Shoes off. Lie face down." It sounded simple. Jacket off. It took me 3 agonizing minutes to peel my wet jacket off. Every movement was a battle against gravity and my own traitorous muscles. I had to lean against the wall to get my left arm out. Then I had to switch hands to get the bag off my shoulder without dropping it. My shirt was soaked with sweat and rain, sticking to my skin. I felt pathetic, weak, a man who used to run marathons now defeated by a zipper. She didn't offer to help. I realized later that this was a kindness. She stood by the sink, scrubbing her hands for a full minute, giving me the space to struggle without an audience. She wasn't watching me flounder. She was giving me privacy. She was letting me keep my dignity. I placed the laptop bag on a chair in the corner, positioning it carefully so it was facing the table, keeping it within my line of sight. Always within sight. "Shoes," she reminded me, drying her hands with paper towels. I kicked them off. I couldn't bend down to untie them, so I just shoved them off with my heels. When I finally maneuvered myself toward the table, I paused. The idea of leaning forward seemed impossible. "Use the hip hinge," Harlee said, stepping up beside the table. She tapped her own hip bone. "Bend here. Keep the lumbar spine neutral. Use your arms to lower yourself. Do not round your back." I followed her instruction. It hurt, but it was manageable. When I finally lowered my torso onto the vinyl surface and my face settled into the face rest, the relief of being horizontal was so profound I almost wept. The gravity shifted. The compression on my discs eased. Just a fraction. The table was firm. The paper on the headrest smelled of nothing clean, sterile, nothing. I heard the water stop, the rustle of paper towels being crumpled and tossed. Then I felt her hands. They were warm, dry, and incredibly strong. Her palms were calloused surgeon's hands that knew the resistance of bone and ligament. She placed them on my upper back, right over the trapezius muscles that felt like steel cables stretched to their breaking point. She didn't press down immediately. She didn't massage. She just held the contact. A static, grounding pressure. Letting the heat transfer. Letting my brain register that this touch is safe. "Breathe," she said. "I am." I mumbled into the face rest. My voice muffled. "No." She corrected instantly. "You're ventilating. You're sipping air into the top 10% of your lungs because you're afraid expansion will hurt your ribs. I need you to breathe. In through the nose. Fill the diaphragm. I want to feel your ribs expand against my hands. Out through the mouth." I tried. I drew a breath in. It rattled in my chest. A jagged, uneven rhythm. My ribs fought against the expansion. "Again," she commanded gently. "Deeper. Trust the table." I took another breath, deeper this time. She moved her hands down my spine, palpating each vertebrae with a surgeon's precision. She wasn't looking for relaxation. She was looking for pathology. She was checking the alignment of the spinous processes. She stopped at my T12 vertebrae, right at the thoracolumbar junction, the pivot point where the rib cage ends and the lower back begins. She pressed her thumb into the paraspinal muscle on the right side. I flinched, my whole body jerking on the table as a fresh wave of fire washed over me. "Your tension is deep," she said quietly. Her voice came from directly above me, calm and analytical. "This isn't— I sat in a chair too long tension, Kayson. This isn't ergonomics. This is muscular guarding on a massive scale." She held the pressure point. It hurt, but it was a good hurt, the kind that signaled a release was coming. "This is structural defiance," she said. "Your body is bracing for an impact that hasn't happened yet. Or maybe one that happens every day." I closed my eyes. Darkness surrounded me. "It feels like it's happening right now." "What are you running from?" she asked. It wasn't a casual question. It wasn't small talk. Her hands didn't stop moving. They worked the muscle, teasing out the knot, finding the trigger point, and holding it. I stiffened. The question was too accurate, too close to the bone. "Physiologically," she continued. Her tone, clinical but perceptive, moving her thumbs lower. "Your sympathetic nervous system is redlining. Your adrenals are dumping cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream at a toxic rate. You are in full fight or flight mode, Kayson. But you are lying still on a table. That energy has nowhere to go. It can't fight, and it can't fly. So it turns inward. It's tearing your muscles apart. You are vibrating." I turned my head to the side on the face rest, trying to alleviate the pressure on my neck. Through the slats of the wooden blinds on the high window in the exam room, I could see a slice of the street outside. The rain was still falling, silver streaks in the streetlight, and then I saw it. The black SUV had moved. It wasn't down the block anymore. It wasn't in the loading zone. It was double parked directly in front of the clinic. The massive grille was inches from the bumper of my car. The engine was idling, exhaust puffing white plumes into the cold rain. The headlights were off, but the cabin light was on. I could see the silhouette of the driver. He was big. He was wearing a dark jacket. He was holding a phone to his ear. He wasn't looking at the road. He was looking at the front door of the Foundry. He was looking at me. "Kayson," Harlee said. Her voice changed. It dropped the clinical detachment instantly. It became sharp, alert. It was the voice of someone who recognized a predator in the tall grass. "Who is in the black SUV?" My heart stopped. The blood drained from my face, leaving me cold and nauseous. "You saw it?" I whispered. "I notice variables," she said. "I noticed you checking the window 3 times before you lay down. I noticed your pupil dilation was uneven. And I noticed a car idling in a fire lane with no lights on, directly blocking my entrance. I tried to push myself up. Panic spiked in my chest, overriding the pain for a second. I have to go. I shouldn't have come here. I'm putting you in danger." Her hand landed on my shoulder. She didn't push. She just held me there. It was a heavy, grounding weight. "Stay down," she ordered. "You don't understand," I whispered urgently, twisting my neck to look up at her. He's a fixer for a very powerful company. He's not going to knock. He's going to come in." Harlee removed her hand from my shoulder. I heard her footsteps recede. She walked out of the exam room, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the floor. I thought she was going to call the police. Or maybe get her purse and tell me to leave before things got messy. I started to slide my legs off the table, wincing as my hip flexors grabbed. I reached for my bag. Then I heard a sound. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a siren. It was a mechanical sound. Heavy, final. Tunk, click, the sound of heavy, industrial deadbolts sliding home. Steel shooting into steel housing. Then the rattle of metal. A distinct, rolling sound of a security gate being pulled across the glass. Clang. She walked back into the room. She looked exactly the same. Calm, competent, unafraid. She hadn't even checked her phone. She walked back to the table, washed her hands again, a ritual of cleanliness, and dried them. "I locked the door," she said. I stared at her. I stopped trying to get up. "Why?" "Because you are my patient," she said, standing beside the table like a sentinel, "and nobody interrupts my clinical sessions." especially not men in cheap suits who think they own the sidewalk. He might break it, I said, my voice trembling. He wants what I have. That gate is reinforced steel, she said casually, checking the control panel on the table, dialing up the traction setting. I installed it after the riots 3 years ago. I'm a specialist in trauma reconstruction, Kayson. I like things to be secure. Now, put your head back down. We aren't done. The rain hammered on the roof. The SUV idled outside, and Dr. Harlee Price put her hands back on my spine. Breathe, she said, and for the first time in 3 days, I did. Part IV. The loft. We spent the next 36 hours in a strange, suspended reality. Harlee didn't just lock the door. She gave me a sanctuary. Above the clinic, accessible only by a keycard she kept on a lanyard around her neck, was a loft. It had been the foreman's office when the building was a cannery. Now, it was her retreat. It was sparse, clean, and smelled of old books and rain. There was a leather couch, a kitchenette, and a wall of windows that looked out over the alley, away from the street where the shark was circling. She brought me up there after she finished treating my back. She gave me ice packs. She gave me anti-inflammatories from her private supply. She heated up soup. And then, we waited. I sat on the couch, laptop open, finalizing the affidavit for the FBI. Harlee sat in the armchair opposite me, reading a thick medical journal. She didn't hover. She didn't ask nervous questions. She just existed in the space, a solid, grounding presence. Why? I asked her on the second night. The rain had turned to a drizzle. She looked up. Her glasses slipped down her nose slightly. Why what? Why help me? You could have called the cops. You could have kicked me out. I'm a liability. She took off her glasses. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. I was a trauma surgeon in the ER for 10 years, Kayson. Do you know what the hardest part of that job is? I shook my head. It's seeing the damage after it's done, she said. Stitching up bodies that were broken because nobody intervened in time. Nobody stopped the car. Nobody locked the door. I got tired of being the mechanic who only sees the wreck. I wanted to be the one who prevents the crash. She stood up and walked over to the window. She didn't look out. She just looked at the reflection of the room in the dark glass. You came into my clinic broken, she said. You were in structural failure. My job is to restore alignment. Sending you out there to get broken again. That would be malpractice. I looked at her. Really, looked at her. She wasn't just a doctor. She was a force of nature. And she was beautiful in a way that terrified me. Not the polished, artificial beauty of the girls I dated in college. This was the beauty of a mountain, or a suspension bridge. Capability, strength. I found $40 million, I said quietly, stolen from a pension fund. That's why they're after me. She turned. A pension fund? For who? Dock workers, carpenters, people who work with their hands. A small, wry smile touched her lips. People like you, I agreed. She walked over to the couch. She sat down next to me. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that I could smell the cedar soap on her skin. Then you're protecting the structure? She said. Just like I am? She reached out. She didn't ask. She placed her hand on the back of my neck, her fingers finding the tension point at the base of my skull. It wasn't a medical touch this time. It was something else. How is the pain? She asked softly. Gone, I lied. It was a dull ache now, but her touch masked it completely. Liar, she whispered. But she didn't pull away. We sat there for a long time. The only sound was the hum of my laptop and the distant sirens of the city. I felt a shift in the air, a realignment. The professional boundary was still there, but it was thinning, like ice in the spring. I wanted to lean into her hand. I wanted to bury my face in her shoulder. I wanted to stop being the guy who ran and just be the guy who stayed. Harlee, I said, Kayson, when this is over, when I file this report, I'm technically not your patient anymore. That is the definition of discharge, she agreed. Her thumb brushed the pulse point behind my ear. My heart hammered against her skin. Does your code of ethics say anything about dinner? I asked. My voice was rough. She looked at me. Her gray eyes were dark in the low light. She looked at the 12 years between us. She looked at the danger outside. And then she looked at me. The code says I can't date a patient, she said. It doesn't say I can't date a man who walked into my clinic and proved he had a spine of steel. She stood up. Her hand trailed away, leaving a ghost of warmth on my skin. Finish the affidavit, she said. Survival first, dinner later. Part V. The alignment. The next morning, the sun broke through. It was weak and watery, but it was light. The storm had passed. Harlee drove me to the FBI field office in her Volvo. She drove like she did everything else with precision and total control. She parked in the secure lot. She walked me to the checkpoint. She stood guard while I met the agents. She waited. I spent 6 hours inside. I gave them everything. The drive, the names, the accounts. By noon, the news broke. Vanguard Logistics raided. CFO arrested. The threat evaporated. The shark in the SUV was recalled or arrested. I was just a guy again. I walked out of the building. The air was crisp. Harlee was leaning against her car, reading a paperback. She looked up. She wasn't wearing the white coat. She was wearing a leather jacket and jeans. She looked younger, freer. I walked over to her. I didn't limp. I stood tall. Structure status? She asked, closing her book. Aligned, I said. Stable. Load-bearing capacity at 100%. Good. I checked the paperwork, I said, stepping into her personal space. I am officially discharged. Is that so? I reached out. I took her hand. Her fingers were strong, calloused, real. You said my tension was deep, I said. It was. It's gone, I said. You unlocked it. She squeezed my hand. A smile broke across her face, radiant and rare. Come on, Kayson, she said. I know a place with great ergonomics and terrible wine. Perfect, I said. We walked down the street together. I didn't check over my shoulder. I didn't look for the black SUV. I looked at her. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I was going.